realizing that someone told me this and I love this. If you feel the need to hold on to it really tightly and control it, it was never yours to begin with. Damn, let go. If you feel like you have to hold on to something, what are we doing? Like, we don't own anyone. We don't own anything. Everything is just fluid and moving, and we go through chapters. And I would love to spend my life with Connor, but I can't tell you what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. Maybe we end up hating each other. Maybe we fall in love with other people. Like, who am I to say? But if you continue to choose each other and have curiosity and fun and playfulness and core values of whatever that is for you, then everything is kind of up for fun. Like, you just get to let go and see where it takes you, because we don't have the control we think we do. We don't have to micromanage, because it's not going to work. Things are going to evolve organically the way they're meant to. And so if we can let go, we can enjoy life so much more.
Yes. Welcome my beautiful guest, Kelli Tennant. Kelli is a former sports reporter turned top 50 podcast host and the CEO of Soulfire Productions. On her wildly popular podcast, The Kelli Show, shares a juicy intersection between spiritual and sexual liberation. She helps women break free from a lineage of toxic lies and rules. She's an intuitive facilitator, Reiki and hypnosis practitioner, women's circle facilitator, and plant medicine advocate. Well, Kelli, I am so honored to have you on my podcast now. It was so great chatting with you on your podcast, The Kelli Show. So thank you again for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. I just adore you, and you're such a light. I think I told you this when we talked before, and it's so nice to be around women who just exude so much light and love and really walk their walk, and you show up so genuinely, and I'm really grateful to know you.
Thank you. Well, I received that. So thank you for noticing that in me. That is definitely my mission, to spread the light and help others ignite the light within them. So thank you. So where to begin this conversation? We're probably gonna go a bunch of places, but mostly I want to focus on connecting to your wild woman, because I know that is the path you've stepped into, and also you've really connected with your sexuality and then also your spirituality. So I want to get into that. But before we do, since I know you've pivoted quite a bit, learning more about you, as we were talking about before I pressed record, I heard of you through the Ceremony Wellness podcast, and I started following you. And then I saw you doing your retreat, and I was like, this is amazing. I got to go, but I wasn't able to go. And my friend went instead. And I know she thought it was dynamite. And so that's how I found out about you. But you've pivoted quite a bit. So for those that don't know you, I would love if you could share your journey that led you to the space you're in today. I know you had a career in sports, and then you made the decision to leave that career. So if you could kind of take us back.
Yeah. I mean, holy pivot over and over. I don't know how you feel, but in my awakening, I feel like I'm a different person every day. I'm like, okay. And now we evolve again, new version of self. Got it. Yeah, it's been really interesting. I was a TV host in sports. I played volleyball my entire life, and I had chronic illness the entire time I had worked in television. So I kind of felt like I had been living this double life where I felt horrible. I was depressed. I was super sick. I was suicidal at times, but then I would go on camera and be like the hot chick on TV in the really nice dress who would, get the guys to talk to her and have great interviews. And it just felt like such different parts of me. And I felt like I was kind of forcing things and had to show up a certain way so that I would look and play the part on television and in my career, so I could keep climbing that ladder, where in reality, I was just suffering and hated my life behind the scenes. And when I left that career behind, it was really an opportunity for me to start over and to really ask those hard questions that I know you talk about on your show all the time. It's like, who am I? What do I actually want? What do I desire? How have I been living to please other people? And if I didn't have that energy output into that, what would I have space for? And so I started my podcast. I knew that I wanted to utilize my gift of interviewing people and connecting with people and making them feel comfortable and having really interesting conversations in the next iteration of my life. I just didn't know exactly what that was. And at the time, I was healing from chronic illness. And so I wanted to have conversations around alternative medicine, have my doctors on, other women who had dealt with similar things, so that we could provide resources and a platform where people could have those conversations and realize that there was something else possible outside of Western medicine and the norm. And then as that show went on, I kept going on my spiritual journey. I started, sitting with plant medicine, started, I guess, participating in a consensual non-monogamous relationship. And so it's just like, I changed so much. And so it became ceremony wellness, which was still in that wellness, like healing space. And then I like took a hard left turn and I went into sexuality, because that's where I was. I was having these awarenesses around how suppressed I was for so long, and how much I wasn't connected to my body, how unsafe I felt in my body, how I hadn't really recognized a lot of desires that I had been having for so long. And so I just kind of let it come to the surface. And that's what created the Kelli show the way it is today, which is kind of a merging of everything that I've gone through, but really helping women set themselves free from all these toxic lies and rules that we've been fed our entire lives, so that we can create our own reality and take responsibility for our lives and get really clear on who we are and what we desire in our lives, and know that we deserve it and are worthy of it.
All that. Love it. Oh my goodness. Okay. So just to pull out some things, I know you said you were not so connected to your body, and I really would love if you could share vulnerably where that stemmed from. Because I know you talked about, and I could really, really relate to this. So I've been doing this job called fit modeling for a very long time, where my body is desired. Like, I fit the clothes. So it's all about my body. Chop off my head, doesn't matter. And I always, when I was younger, I was seen for my body. Oh, she has great curves, the butt, and like all these things, which was nice. It's a nice compliment, but I felt for so long I was just seen for my body, especially because my job for so long led me into that, to be seen for my body. And so you being in the sports industry, and you were mentioning that, hot girl that's interviewing guys, what is she wearing and all these things. I'm curious if that was the reason that you felt kind of disconnected to your body, or what, if you could kind of put things together of how that affected you.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I went for this interview, and the executive looked at me and she said, I just want you to know that most of us turn off the audio when we look at your reel. So this is like your audition tape that you send out. She's like, we just look at what you look like. And I was like,
terrific.
Oh, okay. That's great. I'm so glad that I really worked hard on how I present myself and speak, and my tone and like the whole thing. And that really was sort of this rude awakening. And from there, it continued on into, I had an executive at NFL Network who I was interviewing with, and he literally held my fucking hand walking through NFL Network studios, showing me off. I was 22, 21 at the time, showing me off to everyone there. Like, this man, 30 years older than me, who would hire me, was the talent manager, held my hand like a child, or like his fucking side piece girlfriend, walking around. And that was my introduction into this world. And so I really believed and was told that you have to look a certain way and act a certain way in order to climb this ladder. And I think part of the body disconnection started in volleyball, because I was one of the top athletes in the country, highly recruited, cover of Volleyball magazine, in a bikini, by the way. And my body was my vessel for all my success. It was like, how high can you jump? How strong are your legs? How good do you look in spandex? And that is where I got my attention and validation. So very similar to you, it was like, yeah, take your head off, make her be quiet. What does she look like and how is she performing? So I think it started there. And then I had an eating disorder in college when I had chronic illness and couldn't play volleyball anymore because I was having an identity crisis. And so the only thing I could control was the food I was putting in my mouth and how my body looked. And so I went through that, and then went straight into television and had these men prancing around with me. And I had, bosses tell me your dress isn't short enough, or that needs to be tighter, or don't wear your hair back because your ears are too big, and just constant criticism. And so I think that really disconnected me, while at the same time, I've experienced sexual trauma in my life as well as during my career. So I also felt like I had to flee all the time. I don't think
Mm.
I ever really landed in my body because I was in a constant state of fight or flight, constant state of trying to prove myself, and also not wanting to be present in my body because who knows what's going to happen. And if I'm really here and I have to experience that, what is that going to be like? And so it's been years and years of coming to terms with that, what that is, going through somatic therapy, physically moving this stuff out of my body, working with plant medicine, actual talk therapy, to really understand how I was disconnected, because I didn't know, I didn't have that awareness back then. I didn't know what that viscerally felt
Yeah.
like. And now I realize I was kind of like the shell of a human walking around without my soul fully landed in. That's the only way I can think to describe it.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for vulnerably sharing that. I completely understand it. And touching on your chronic illnesses, do you think that stemmed from the sexual trauma, or what happened, like that you had these chronic illnesses? Did you discover what it was and where it stemmed from?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that chronic illness is a physical manifestation of something energetically and trauma
Absolutely.
based. And so I don't know that I can pinpoint one thing specifically, but I think the overarching theme of all of it was that I was a people pleaser. I lived with extreme anxiety and I never felt good enough or worthy enough. And so I think my body was revolting against me this whole time, trying to get my attention. Really,
Mm.
I actually want to rephrase that. I don't think it was revolting against me. I think it was trying to get my attention. I think it was really loudly in every way possible trying to shake me the fuck awake and be like, yo, you are not paying attention. How many ways do we need to show you this? And once I got a proper diagnosis and started working through my trauma with different healers and doctors, I haven't had a problem since. I was healed in a year and a half and never had another symptom of chronic illness since that point, after being sick for 14, 15 years and bedridden for some of it.
Unbelievable. I completely agree. I think it's a signal to us like, hey, like you need to pay attention to what's happening. Like there's some reason for this. I believe there's always a root cause to everything. And generally it comes from either trauma or something that has been manifested into your body. And then it's reacting and responding. It's kind of like the inflammation, for example. Inflammation is a sign that there is something happening and it's a way to protect our body. So I believe we're all connected, right?
Yes.
But you talked about the disconnection. So of course we're going to go into that. But the other thing I was going to ask you, you were in a career that was, well, I don't know if you agree with this, but somewhat masculine driven, a lot of masculine energy. I'm sure you were around a lot of men. How did that affect your feminine energy?
Oh, yeah. What a fucked up time. um, so I dealt with a lot of amazing men. I'm not going to talk trash on all of them because I think there are a lot of amazing men in the world. I am engaged to one of them, and I have had the pleasure of working with people like Landon Donovan from the Galaxy and the US soccer team, Magic Johnson, who's always been so incredible to me, and the list goes on. But that felt few and far between. Most of what I dealt with was guys trying to get me to go on vacation with them, guys trying to hook up with me, texting me in the middle of the night on the road, treating me like crap if I wouldn't play into their games, and also having a lot of bosses with very intense masculine energy of controlling me and wanting me to be their little puppet. And it really forced me to shut down in so many ways. I never felt like, and I didn't realize this during, but I see it now, I never felt like my genuine self because I was always kind of acting and putting on a play for people. It's like, okay, how do I need to be for this person? How can I be for this
Mm.
person? How can I please them to make sure I get this job or, get this accolade or whatever it was? And I think my feminine energy was so crushed because being around them made me be in a perpetual state of doing and
Mm.
achieving and competition. And anytime a girl would come around, I would want to cut her fucking head off because I looked at her as competition because they
Right.
told me a million girls would want your job. Don't fuck it up. So that was constantly playing in my head. And I'm a 20 something young girl with a lot of insecurities who's just trying to make it in her quote unquote dream job. And so I just felt super out of sorts. I didn't feel any type of balance. I was just constantly grinding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge reason why I wanted to leave the industry, aside from so many other things, was because I saw how I would look at other women and I realized how horrible that was. And I saw how other women looked at me. There were older women in the business who were angry that I was like the young 20 something girl who was getting attention. I was a threat to them. And I thought to myself, I do not want to perpetuate this cycle. And so I started taking young women under my wing. And I'm like, I'm going to help them. I am
That's
not looking
amazing.
at them as competition. We are in this together. There's only so many of us. We have to band together. Otherwise, what the hell? I need to warn these girls about what's going on inside, these locker rooms, because what if I didn't tell them? And then they're like, Kelli, why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And so there was like this protective mom energy that came out. And I think that's where my feminine energy really started to turn on. And I
Mm.
started to see how much power I had that I had given away for so long. And I just realized that I didn't have strong female relationships. I wasn't surrounded by strong feminine energy. And in my healing, I had seen how that was such a hole and how I did have so much of that masculinity within me. And so I think that's part of why I left, because I knew I have to do this differently. Otherwise, I literally will not survive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I could only imagine. I think that's amazing that you recognize that you gain that awareness. I mean, that was a lifesaver for you, literally.
Yeah.
So, did you start your healing journey when you were still in that industry, or was it afterwards? And I'm curious what methods, I know you briefly talked about it. You said
Mm-hmm.
you did some plant medicine, but what in the somatic healing, which I've had somebody on the show talk about somatic healing, and she was saying that she used to do talk therapy for years, let's say 15 years. And when she did somatic, that's when everything changed, which I'm sure you could really relate to. So if you could talk about the methods you dived into and why that was so transformative for you.
Totally. Yeah. So when I was still in TV, I finally found the right doctors to work with that diagnosed me properly. So um, my timelines get a little mixed up because it's all kind of jumbled, but I think it was like the last year of my TV career, somewhere around there, when I started working with these doctors. And I found a functional medicine doctor, Dr. Lekos, who's in LA, and then Marta Sofer, who's an Ayurvedic doctor, and she owns Surya Spa. So I started working with both of them at the same time, and they actually really complement each other, and they're obsessed with each other because I introduced them and now they love each other and it's hilarious. I'm like, you guys are healing the world. But I used Ayurveda and functional medicine to heal. So we just went through, all the different stool testing and I mean, every biomarker you can go through, realizing I had SIBO and Epstein-Barr virus, which had been active for like 15 years in my body, which is crazy. No wonder I felt like crap. Chronic fatigue syndrome, and my liver was completely blocked. So Panchakarmas and Ayurveda was really powerful. And working with both of them, they really believe what we believe is that trauma is stored in the body. And if you don't work it out of you and really clear yourself, then you're going to be physically sick. So, Dr. Lekos, my first time with him, it was like a 2.5 hour session with him. And one of the first things he said to me was like, so I'm going to send you to a shaman. And I'm like, uh-huh. And he
Uh-huh.
explains to me, he's like, I have this incredible shaman. She does really powerful work. We need to clear your body. And then I go see Marta, and she said, okay, so there's, ayahuasca and combo, and I really recommend that you go do them. And at the same time, I don't know if you know Jordan Younger, the Balanced Blonde.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
she's in LA, and she was kind of my guinea pig. I told her, I was like, okay, you want to go do this thing, you go try it and then tell me how it is and I'll test it out. So I just like followed her around. And so she was going to do ayahuasca, and I ended up going a couple weeks after she went because she just had an incredible experience. And so that's when I started getting into ayahuasca. I did combo shortly thereafter, and just started like purging a lot of this out of my body. And since then, I've worked with many different healers. I've done ayahuasca again in Costa Rica. I've sat with mushrooms quite a bit, microdosed, and everything has been about clearing and really coming back to myself and working with practitioners that are really in integrity and help me find my own strength and come back to me and not rely on someone else to be my magic pill or fix something for me. And then I've also been in talk therapy for the last year and a half. My therapist teaches from A Course in Miracles. She is so woo-woo, which I
That's
love
nice.
because I really get an amazing balance. And I feel like because I did somatic therapy for like 6 to 8 months, and Connor and I did it together, I have a lot of those tools to be able to work things out of my body. So I
Mm,
don't feel like I need somatic therapy anymore because I gained those tools during that time. So I'm able to kind of combine it with the talk therapy. And whenever I feel kind of stuck or like I need to move through an emotion, I have the tools and awareness to be able to do that.
amazing. What is combo?
Combo is so they take the venom off of the back of a frog and they
Whoa.
burn holes. Yeah, it's a whole
I've
thing.
never heard
It's
this.
very prevalent in the Amazon. It's incredible. They pair it with ayahuasca, especially when you're going through like shamanic initiation, because it's extremely purgative. It's a very
Mm,
quick experience. It lasts for, I mean, 40 minutes max. But they burn holes in your skin and then they put the venom on it. And then you have your experience. And it can be different for everyone, but is very much about purging. So you can throw up, you can be on the toilet, you can do what I did and do both at the same time for half an hour, which is highly enjoyable. But it's really about physically getting rid of any energies, toxins, experiences that are stuck in you.
mhm.
And it's really interesting. This is super graphic and disgusting, but I find this fascinating. When you look in your bucket, the practitioner I work with, who is everything, I love her. And she's in Malibu. If you're interested, I can give you her
Okay.
info after this. But you look in the bucket and she can identify what you just purged based on the color and what, not what it feels like, but like the density of it. And she
Wow.
knows. And it's really powerful. I think I've done it 3 times with her and it's incredibly transformative.
Wow. Oh, yes. I've never heard of that. I have yet to do ayahuasca. I'm definitely curious. I'm kind of like following my curiosity. We'll see, you know.
You're Aya curious.
Yeah, exactly. But I do want to start to talk about the how you merge spirituality and sexuality, and you've stated that's how you find your true self. So how the sexuality, when did you learn that was something that you needed to tap into and reconnect to?
In my last relationship, I felt really suppressed near the end. I didn't feel like I was able to express myself. And I felt like sexually, I was starting to realize things that I wanted, whether it was positions or experiences or feelings. And I felt like it kept getting shut down in every scenario. And I knew that I wanted to be able to explore more. And so when I came into a couple months after that, I was heading into my first ayahuasca experience and I didn't know what to expect. I just went in really open and I did work through a lot of different traumas and things that had happened in my life. But one of the biggest pieces I learned was just how orgasmic my experience could be. And I remember moving my hips in a way I never had before on the mat during ceremony.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like I was, air humping or like grinding on something. It was almost just like if you feel like your hips are really tight and then all of a sudden you get amazing body work and it feels unlocked and you're like, oh, thank God. That's kind of what I would describe it as. And it felt euphoric and orgasmic. And I felt connected to my body in a way I never had before. And I went into another ayahuasca experience a couple months later with Connor at Soltara in Costa Rica, and I had a very orgasmic experience one of the nights. It was like the whole time. It was all about my sexual energy and opening up my body and being curious around being with women and what that attraction was. And so for me, I just started to see I was having spiritual experiences that were opening me in a lot of ways, but also sexuality was now weaving into it. And I just saw that the more I opened in both areas, the more my life expanded, the more pleasure I was receiving and inviting into my life. And I knew that if I was super suppressed sexually, but open in other areas of my life, that something was still off because sexuality is such a huge portion, at least for me, of who I am. And so if I keep that closed, it feels very restricted and it feels very tight. And as someone who I call myself a recovering control freak and people pleaser, if I'm still restricting and super tight in one of the most profound areas of my life, how am I actually letting go and releasing control and not needing to people please? So I really have sat with the sexuality piece of how can I let go and be in pleasure and not try to micromanage everything and be so scared of the unknown. What if I can welcome that in? And that's when things really shifted for me. And I started to feel what I wanted to feel. I started to desire what was coming up for me and allowing myself to play it out in real life and realizing for most of the time how much I enjoyed it and how much it felt really good and what that opened up in every part of me.
Hmm. And so after your experience, how did you start to implement that in your life? I know you talk about personal, sexual pleasure, but what were the direction you went, and what type of practices did you start to implement in your life to bring this more alive in your body?
Yeah, it really started with just having conversations with Connor and telling him what was coming up for me around my desire to be with women and what that looked like. And I was curious about threesomes and how could I implement that. And I was really, really scared and at the same time very excited and aroused by these ideas, which for me at the time was and still is. We just had a conversation about this a couple of days ago because it still comes up. It's like conflicting feelings. How can this be my deepest fear, which is abandonment and watching my partner be with someone else, while at the same time arouse me? How is that possible? That's fucking
Mm.
scary. And we're not taught how to hold quote unquote conflicting emotions or ideas and the duality of it, and that it's okay to have both. It's more than okay. And so we just kept having conversations and then we started talking about things in bed. So I would share my desires and I would talk about different scenarios, which is something I've never done before. Just little things day by day where we started to share. And it was big for him too. He was opening up sexually as well as I did and kind of gave each other permission along the way. And then we started to have experiences in real life of inviting women in to be with us and going through that whole I wouldn't say roller coaster of emotions, but vast array of emotional options that came up over the last few years. And then also being in self pleasure practice with myself and creating a really safe environment and container for me within my body and my day to day so that I knew I had this foundation of safety and going into these experiences allowed me to be more curious because I always knew, okay, I have this container. It feels really good. I have my man, I have myself. We are connected, it's intimate, it's beautiful, and I get to add this thing in that feels really good. And I can be curious about new experiences because of it.
Wow. Okay, so I just had Layla Martin on my podcast, and
Yes, I saw.
we talked about the personal sexual pleasure practice and how essential that is, because that sacredness that you create for yourself lets you have that expansive experience within your relationship. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could take that experience and bring it to your relationship. So if somebody is looking to, let's say somebody feels, number one, disconnected to their body, and maybe they've experienced sexual trauma or whatever it may be, they just feel like the sexual part of their life is a little diminished, not so alive right now. Where do they begin to
Mm-hmm.
start connecting with their body? How do we begin to create that sacred space for ourselves so that we can become alive again?
Yeah, I love talking about this because it's one of the biggest hurdles that we have, whether you're a man or a woman. Connor had a lot of sexual shame and body shame, feeling like he was wrong for some of his desires. He was a fat kid when he was little, and so he had like a lot of body dysmorphia and not feeling like he had been good enough, and so he felt like he needed to prove himself. So there's a lot going on with both of us, and so I want to address this to everyone and whatever this looks like for you, but for me, it was all about safety. If I could feel safe in my body and my experience, I am open to other experiences, something new, maybe uncomfortable, maybe unknown. And so what I did was when I first started kind of embarking on this journey was I started taking baths. Baths were the most profound thing I ever did for myself because I love taking baths. But beyond just loving the experience itself, I feel nurtured, I feel held, and I feel really safe in a bath. And so I took that time and awareness and I lit candles, I played music, I, created this really beautiful space with dried flowers and bath salts and shut everyone out. And I took my time. I took my hour for myself and I started to touch my body in a non sexual way. How often do we, especially as women, just touch our arms, touch our legs, massage our own feet. We just don't do that. We're so disconnected from self. We don't even acknowledge these meat suits that we've chosen for ourselves in this experience. And so, how are we ever going to be disconnected? How are we ever going to actually land in our bodies? And so, I found the place where I felt most held, most safe, most sacred. And I took that time to just start touching my body. And I would just lightly run my fingers on my arms, down my legs, over my stomach, over my boobs, on my neck, and I started to feel really safe doing that. And then that led me into a self pleasure practice because after months of just touching myself, in a really organic, beautiful way, it naturally led to me being aroused. And then that's when I would start to have fantasies and think about things that would turn me on. And then I was able to expand that self pleasure practice outside of the bath. So then I would take it into the bedroom and then I would add it in with Connor. So I would be able to share with him the things that I had been thinking in my head that I was so scared for anyone to know. Then I could verbalize them and then we could act things out. And so it was step by step of kind of trial and error. What feels good? What doesn't? Why doesn't it feel good? And asking myself questions in between those experiences of what does safety actually feel like? And if something makes you scared or nervous, why is that? Usually for me, if something scares me or makes me nervous, it's because I want it and that freaks me out. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Or that's not okay. And so I talk myself through that because I know that. And then I also know from these experiences what is a yes and what's a no. If I'm doing something and I don't feel safe and I contract, well, that's a no. And maybe it's not a no forever, but maybe I need to figure out what it is that's freaking me out or making me feel unsafe so that I can work through it. And on the opposite, what feels really expansive and really good. And maybe I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited to try it and I'm curious about it. And I feel safe to take that step. I have that body awareness now because I took quiet space for myself.
I was just going to say, you have phenomenal self awareness. And I don't think many people have that type of awareness. And do you think that was gained through your holistic healing experiences? Is that
Totally.
okay?
Yeah, I don't think I was aware at all. I mean, I was it's so funny because people in my life now, they're like, "You were like that?" I'm like, "I swear to God, just go talk to my brother for a second. He'll tell you how I was." I had a stick on my ass. I was a little
Crazy.
princess bitch. I thought I was better than everyone. I wanted to constantly prove I was better than you because as long as I was better than you and out achieving you, then I was safe. That was my whole thing. Had to be super competitive. And I used to break girls' noses when I played volleyball when I was 12 years old
Mm.
because I got so much attention for it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the bad bitch, crushing people. I'm
Yeah.
more important than you. And I just didn't have any awareness around my body, which is why I think I had to be sick for 14, 15 years so that I could respond because I just
Wow.
didn't pay attention to the signs. And throughout my whole healing journey, which continues today, it's always going back to that awareness, to asking myself better questions and to saying, what am I meant to see right now?
Mm. I love that. Oh my goodness. I think that's just beautiful. And do you journal to help, uncover what that is, or is it just like a mental game?
Yeah, when I first started, I journaled a lot. The first few years, it was so much journaling because for me, it felt like I was physically getting stuff out of my body by writing it down. And now I don't journal as much because for me, it's almost more of a somatic practice of it's in my body and I feel through it. I know when I need to cry. I know when I want to be held. I know when I need to call a friend to talk, when I need to be in nature. I just have those awarenesses. So I don't necessarily feel like I need to write it down. It is more of that conversation in a mind way, but also conversation within my body of allowing whatever feelings I have to come forward and then moving through them.
Wow. And also, not to forget to mention, you must have a dynamic relationship to be able to speak your desires. And I think some people hope they have that, but maybe not as, uh, they don't feel they have as much freedom to speak their mind. So how could we start that conversation with our partner if we feel like we're ashamed of our desires, or we just don't know how to speak them? Like, how do we begin that conversation if we don't feel we have that safe container yet?
Yeah, it can be really nerve wracking. And I think sometimes starting with a partner is actually too overwhelming. I often tell a lot of the girls that are in my monthly community or who listen to the podcast, just journaling, writing down what you desire, the things that you would never want your mom to see in your journal or your boyfriend to see. Just get it out of your body and see it in front of you. I think that's a really amazing first step, because oftentimes the story we create in our head about a desire or something we want or how we feel is so much more convoluted and worse in our head. And then we write it down or we speak it out loud and we're like, oh, okay, that's not as bad as I thought it was. And so sometimes it's just getting out of your body with yourself. And then I think therapy is actually a really great way to start discussing these things, because it can get really overwhelming for a partner to listen to you share these things and maybe not have the tools and resources to respond. And so then you put them in fight or flight because now they're super uncomfortable and maybe they have a lot of shame. And then you just keep projecting your shame onto each other because neither of you know how to handle this conversation. Yeah. I think whether you go together or you go on your own, talking to a therapist and saying, hey, I'm having these feelings, desires, I'm really confused, I don't know how to talk to my partner about it. And then you have some tools and resources for how to have this conversation. And you've kind of worked through some of it before you bring it to them. I noticed that with Connor, if I can work through something with my girlfriend or my therapist and be super emotional and like cry and, be just all over the place and chaotic in that space, then I can come to him in a really grounded way, say, hey, I've been working through this thing. I'm having these feelings. I feel uncomfortable and confused. And I just want you to know that this is what's coming up for me. And I'm not really sure what to do with it, but this is where I am. That allows that person to show up for you, because you're not going to them asking for answers or for them to fix you. You just really need them to hold space or to listen. And I think that creates a beautiful level of intimacy because you're taking expectation out of it. And you don't have this idea of, okay, this conversation is going to look this way and this is the outcome. So I think those are some of the best ways to do it. And then I think when you get to a point where you're ready to share your desires with your partner, doing it outside of the bedroom, I think is a great way to start, because just imagine, I've been in this situation. You're like writing your boyfriend and it's all hot and heavy. And then you say something and you're freaking nervous and they don't expect it coming. And then it can not go the way that you had planned. And then you freak out. That could happen regardless. But if you're talking about this over coffee, when it's a non-emotional time and you're just like, hey, I have been thinking about this thing and I'm kind of curious about threesomes. And I listened to this podcast, The Kelly Show, and this girl talks about threesomes all the time. And she has a great dynamic with her fiance. And it just got me thinking, I've never done that. And would you be curious? Like, do you think that's weird? And just start a conversation. A lot of my listeners will send my show to their partners and just be like, you should listen to this. And then they have a conversation over dinner that night and talk about it, because it creates a safer space than everyone's naked, dicks are hard, people are turned on. And then it's like, let's just throw this thing in there and see what happens.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned talking it out with somebody else first so that you could approach your partner from more a grounded space. I think that is super important and great advice. Yeah. And then, so talking about like the feminine archetypes, I don't know if you know much of that about them. I've actually recently just learned about them. And what I see came out of you after you did your experience was more the wild woman archetype. So do you, can you share what the wild woman archetype is? And do you relate to that? Do you feel that's kind of the space you're in right now, is really embracing that wild woman?
I don't know do you know what the definition of the wild woman archetype is? Because I would love for you to share that, because I actually don't know.
You know what? I can't remember the exact definition. Like I said, I'm recently learning about it. Yeah. Well, so it's fascinating. Like I said, I recently learned about the archetypes, and like there's the mother, the lover, the wild woman, this, that, and the other. But the wild woman is more like that free spirited, is more outside the box. And I'm trying to think of all the other things, but just what I see of you living your life right now and what you're really exploring seems like the wild woman archetype. So that's why I was just.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. I appreciate that reflection. It's so funny. Connor and I get in little tiffs because I will say things about how I'm not fun enough, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And he's like, you're the most fun girlfriend I've ever had. I have so much fun with you. You're fun all the time. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's because I still see myself as my old version of me. I still haven't really landed into this. And I think the other thing is, I share a lot online about my sexual life, my connection with my body, trauma, lots of things. And people are like, wow, you're so vulnerable and you're so open. And I'm really grateful for those reflections, but I also don't really feel like that. I feel like I'm just being myself. And so
Mhm.
it's always interesting to hear from other people, because the way other people see me isn't necessarily how I'm experiencing myself.
Mm.
And I think it's because I'm almost scared to admit that or embrace it, or maybe it's just a part of who I am now. And so I don't pay attention. But I think that I have very much a wild woman aspect of me that I am embracing very
Mhm.
much sexually, very much the way I express myself. I kind of tell everyone to fuck off if they're, judgmental, or if I'm not your person, like that's totally fine. I don't have to be here for everyone. And I'm not really worried if someone is going to have judgment around me or the way I live my life, because I lived my whole life worrying so much about that and I was
Yeah.
miserable and chronically ill. So like, what's the point? Um, and I think that I also am very nurturing and mothering and warm and welcoming. And so I think I kind of have a mix of both. And I also feel like I'm going into this new chapter as well, where I really want to mother. I want to be pregnant next year. We're planning that. We're going to get married later this year, taking care of, creating our new home together in the mountains. And I really just want to be in that nurturing space and
Yeah.
building a home and a life. And so it feels like there's this mothering, holding, safety, nurturing love happening, while at the same time being the most outside the box, the most sure of who I am, and the most wild and expressed that I've ever been. So it's a really interesting combination of the two.
Yeah. And what's so beautiful is you're embracing it all and letting it unfold as it may without putting pressure on where it needs to go or what box it
Yeah,
needs to sit in, which I think
totally.
is so beautiful. And you're ever evolving, which is, of course, all of us are, and it's beautiful.
Yes.
And I know you kind of touch on this, that you feel like you're still connected to your past self, maybe past beliefs. When you see yourself going there, you see, again, that self-awareness, when you are able to see that you're going into that space of your old beliefs of who you were, how do you bring yourself back, generally speaking?
Oh, yeah. This is such an important conversation to have. And I don't think we talk about this enough. I remember I was having a meltdown. I was living in LA. I was early on, right after a couple ayahuasca ceremonies, having a lot of awarenesses around myself, and I was panicking. I felt like I was spinning out of control because my identity completely shattered. Everything I thought I knew about myself, my world, all of my truths, it was gone. And it felt like I was starting over. And I remember calling my girlfriend, Laura Holloway, who's been just my guide in all of this. And I said to her, I'm so angry at my old self. Like, I hate her. Like, why did she do all these things? Why am I here? I just don't understand. And she said, Kelli, here's the thing. Right now, you are walking up the mountain and you are holding your old self by the hair while she kicks and screams, and you are telling her to
Wow.
shut the fuck up and that she's a piece of shit. And I was like, yeah, that feels pretty accurate. She said, what if we tried something different? What if you grabbed her by the hand and you walked up the mountain with her and you thanked her and were in gratitude for everything she did for you, and that she got you to this point, and that you don't have to fight her. She actually gets to come along for this new iteration of you. I was like, yeah, that sounds way more enjoyable. And so that's what I did. I stopped
Wow.
fighting this old version of me and being angry at her, because she did the best she could with what she had, and she kept us safe. And that's really all we can do at that point until you have more awarenesses, until you have your awakening or open your eyes or whatever your experience is. That's what's going on. And we don't have to have this internal battle of old versus new and look at me, I'm so aware now. Why didn't you understand before? If we're just like beating up our inner child, which how are you ever supposed to heal if that's how you're treating yourself at the end of the day? And so now, whenever I see old patterns come up, insecurities from before, I have a conversation with myself and I say, okay, what's coming up right now? Why are we feeling super triggered? Why are we feeling the need to go back to this pattern? And usually it's because I'm not taking care of myself. And so I'm going back into old chaos and insecurity because I don't feel comfortable in my own body. I haven't, uh, you know, taken a bath. I haven't done self-care. I haven't spent time in quiet. I haven't taken personal time away from, everyone in my life just to be with myself and hear my own thoughts. When I do that, I feel like a different person. The other day, I was freaking out about something, some insecurity I was having, and I talked to Connor about it, and I was like, I just need some space. I immediately went down, got in the bath, created my sacred space, masturbated in the bath, came out a different woman. I was like, all right, let's go. That's all I needed. It wasn't really about anything else. It was just, I was being triggered. I was uncomfortable, and I just had to come back to myself and know that I've got it. I've got me. I can take care of myself. I don't need anyone else to fill me up, and everything is okay.
Wow, that's so great. I totally saw that visual of you walking up the mountain. And that's such a beautiful way for people to practice, holding their inner child and comforting that inner child. And exactly like, thank you for everything I've been through, because it's taught me and brought me to where I needed to be to become my best self.
Yes.
So beautiful. I love that. So talking about those practices you do to reconnect to yourself, your feminine energy, you mentioned the bath, masturbation. Is there anything else that you feel is just like anything you could suggest to somebody else to connect with mostly their feminine side? And I know masculine side, we could hustle, we could work on things, work on the next project, those things easy to figure out, but the feminine side, bringing it back.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest things that I see and feel is taking responsibility for your own life and understanding that we are always in choice to create our own reality. And getting to that point for me looks like asking myself better questions and being radically honest. I think we do a really good job of justifying things and lying to ourselves because it makes us feel more safe and comfortable. But if you're not willing to get uncomfortable and you're not willing to think outside the box, your life is never going to change. You're going to continue to live in the reality you currently have, which I'm guessing if you're wanting to change things, you don't really love. Right. So how can we be more honest with ourselves, ask ourselves more penetrating questions that get deeper to the root, what you were talking about earlier, and really allowing ourselves to take responsibility, but not feel shame around that. Look, we all make mistakes. We all do things because we have one set of, one context, one awareness, one ability to see something. And then the more you know, the better you do. So you have a new awareness, you have new context for a situation, you get to make a new decision for yourself, which allows you to be in choice and create your reality. We choose the lens through which we see the world and ourselves and our experiences. If all you see is abandonment, which is what I saw, I had the abandonment lens in. That's everything in my life. They're going to leave me. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. That's just how I walked through the world. I had no idea I was doing that until I did. And I was like, oh, I can choose something different. So I put on the lens of they're having their experience. I'm having mine. I am enough and whole as I am. I can never be abandoned if I do not abandon myself. Boom. My whole world changed. I don't see abandonment anymore. I don't see I'm unworthy and I'm not lovable and I'm not good enough. Do I have triggers and go back into old patterns? Of course, I'm human. But that's not the lens that I choose to have my experience through, which then makes me feel more safe because I am safe at the end of the day. I really am. I'm not having to convince myself I'm safe. So I have a new lens that I chose. I took responsibility. I feel safe. Now I get to have more fun and more pleasure and be more curious because I chose my experience and I didn't let all this other bullshit, lies and chaos and noise dictate what my life was going to look like.
So well said. And I completely agree and really
Yes.
and completely second that. I love that.
Thank you.
And so creating safety, let's talk about this. So creating safety in our own skin. Besides what you mentioned right now, which is great, just getting to that place and taking radical responsibility and asking ourselves better questions. So I know that a sexual practice for you is very grounding, but what else would you recommend people to do to create that sacred place so they could feel safe?
I think for everyone, it's different of what grounding feels like for you. I know that a bath or being in nature or just playing with the dogs really allows me to kind of land again when I'm feeling like I'm off in the ethers or I'm trying to escape and I feel out of whack. I know those things, those practices really help me. And that's been because I've just tried different things out. I'm like, how does this make me feel? What if I'm in the middle of a bunch of trees? What if I just play with the dogs? And so now I know those are kind of my three go-to things. I think for everyone, it looks different. I also really believe in therapy. I really believe in working through things. Does that mean you have to sit in it and be in therapy for 10 years, constantly going back to the same story? No, take some fucking responsibility and make a new choice for yourself that I choose to live in a new energy and new frequency. And this experience I had, no matter how horrific, because horrific things happen to all of us at different times of our lives, doesn't define me and doesn't control me. I do not give my power to the person who sexually assaulted me. I take that power back. And yes, it happened and it sucked. And I choose to live my life in this way. And I have the power and I am in choice. And so I think being in therapy, working with someone who is trained to help you move through these things, whether it's physically moving it through your body in somatic therapy, whether it's in breath work, meditation, or talking about it, so that you have an idea of what's going on. You can, gain the tools and resources to work on it. And then creating a practice for yourself that anytime something comes up for you, you know how to ground back in. I think that you are then taking a very holistic approach to healing and to safety, because we don't just automatically say, well, I am safe. That's my affirmation. I believe it. Yeah, that fucking doesn't work.
Yeah.
You have to
do
things and be in practice in order for that to reign true in your life, so that when you say it, you actually believe it. So I think there's a lot of different things that we can be in practice with to get to that point.
I feel like this is the art of surrendering and letting go.
Yes.
It is definitely an art form that we have to practice every day. It's not like there's this end result. It's something like, no matter what, we'll have different experiences in life where we need to go back to practicing the art of surrendering and letting go. And I'm sure when you started to welcome other women in the other women in the room and having threesomes, and based on your previous way of being, you had to probably surrender a lot to that fear of abandonment, fear of being possibly him falling for this other woman. And I couldn't even imagine. Let me just tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the whole thing, but I chose that because I wanted to have those experiences. Yay. And I think I chose it subconsciously, unconsciously, what I always mix those up. But one of those, I chose it because I wanted to work through these insecurities. Because what I have learned, sex aside, is that I don't need to be in competition with women, and that I can look at you and you are stunning and you glow and you are light and I just adore you. And that doesn't mean that I'm terrible and not cute or not successful. It's like, cool, she's that, I'm this, we're doing the thing. Like, all feminine energy comes from one place, which is what I saw in ayahuasca. And so if I can understand that you're actually just a reflection of me and vice versa, and that we get to support one another, and that if he wants to go be with someone else, he'll be with someone else, whether we're having threesomes or not. It's like you relinquish this control. And it's really easy for me to say this right now, and I sound super like together and I'm just not insecure. Let's be real. I just cried about this 2 days ago, but it is a process, and it is just realizing that, one, someone told me this and I love this. If you feel the need to hold on to it really tightly and control it, it was never yours to begin with. Damn, let go. If you feel like you have to hold on to something, what are we doing? Like, we don't own anyone. We don't own anything. Everything is just fluid and moving, and we go through chapters. And I would love to spend my life with Connor, but I can't tell you what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. Maybe we end up hating each other. Maybe we fall in love with other people. Like, who am I to say? But if you continue to choose each other and have curiosity and fun and playfulness and core values of whatever that is for you, then everything is kind of up for fun. Like, you just get to let go and see where it takes you, because we don't have the control we think we do. We don't have to micromanage, because it's not going to work. Things are going to evolve organically the way they're meant to. And so if we can let go, we can enjoy life so much more.
Yes. I say this all the time, that anytime we try to control anything, we lose control of everything, including ourselves. I mean, that's when we go crazy. So
I love that.
yeah, it's really true. So I'm curious, just to kind of wrap this up. So you have a lot of programs. I was digging around, and then you have also, is it like a mastermind group, or it's a monthly
My
group,
monthly group. Yeah.
the Onyx, right? Can you
Yes.
share a little bit of what you offer?
Yeah. So I have a few different things. I have a workshop that I did live and recorded. A lot of people I have found are really nervous to do things live when it comes to desire or
Mm.
sharing really personal things about, letting go or what it means to be untamed or how you step into your desires. And so I have a workshop called Unleash Your Goddess, and it's 3 hours, and you can participate in it with yourself. You're like in the group, but you're not live. And it's really helpful for someone who is looking to take those steps into really embodying this wild woman you're talking about, really coming back to yourself, sharing your desires, and holding the vision for the life that you want to create. We are in choice to create our lives. And so we spend this time journaling, moving, dancing, breathing, talking, getting into that place where we feel like we are ready to take that step into co-creation. So that's on my website at kellitennant.com. And then I have the Onyx, like you were talking about, which is a monthly community. So I love the Onyx. We started in January, and we have such an incredible group of women who are really committed to their growth. They show up every month. I facilitate women's circles. We have healers come in who facilitate mediums. I just did a human design masterclass. We have an Akashic Records masterclass in a couple weeks. And it's really just about having access to different conversations and people, fine-tuning your own skills, your abilities, your self-awareness, and also being in a sacred space with women who are not going to judge you, who are really going to hold you in whatever comes up. I mean, we share really vulnerable things, sometimes that these women have never told anyone before. And because this is such a sacred container, they feel like they can open up and they feel really supported. And for me, we can do all the work on our own and with our partners, and that is all well and good. But if we're not in a container with women who can hold us, that we learn how to receive that love, then we're missing a huge facet of our healing. And so I love the sisterhood inside the Onyx. You can check that out on the website as well. But yeah, it's just special to be with all these women.
And then the Onyx is always open for enrollment.
Yes. Yeah.
And how big is this? Like, how many women are there in it right now, for example?
It goes between 30 and 60. Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of the max. So it's not too overwhelming.
It's not too big. Yeah. I want it to be an intimate container,
Yeah.
so that people really feel like they're getting not one-on-one time with me, but feel like they're able to process whatever's coming up for them, sharing with the group, and also feeling connected. Like the girls can talk outside of the Onyx, they talk online. They're really connected, which I think is super cool because it's just another way for us to create more sisterhood outside of it.
Oh, it's remarkable. Everything
Yes.
sounds amazing. And it's interesting that you mentioned that. And I didn't think about that, but the Unleash Your Goddess, how you were saying that a lot of women don't feel comfortable being live to do these exercises or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I completely saw that as like a retreat for women. But then as you mentioned, maybe there's still that woman that feels unsafe in that environment with others.
Totally.
So but that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a new experience for most people. So it's really creating like baby steps
Yeah.
into self-discovery so that then they can take those bigger steps later down the line.
Yeah. So remarkable. And of course you have your, well, you're quick to the draw that you muted that when you're coughing. And also of course you have the Kelli show, which I was recently on, and I'll even plug that in the show notes, but your podcast, what is the sole purpose of your podcast? What's it mostly about?
Yeah, so the podcast is really just the intersection of spirituality and sexuality and everything kind of that comes up within that. So different healing modalities, how to come back to yourself, creating the life of your dreams, holding your vision. And there's a lot of radical responsibility happening for everyone. We're asking hard questions. We're asking penetrating questions so that we can come back to ourselves and know what it is we desire and live the life of our dreams.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. This has been such an honor. Kelli Tennant. Is that how you pronounce it, right?
Yeah.
This is remarkable. I adore you. You're such a light yourself. And I just appreciate everything you're doing and how you are ever evolving and sharing how you are expanding in your world so others can embrace how they will expand in their world as well.
Thank you so much. It was so great being with you, Erica.